Hello and welcome to this bonus episode of the Terrace Scottish Football Podcast. I am your host, Craig Fowler, here on a Sunday morning to look back at the Scottish Cup final between Aberdeen and Celtic, which took place on Saturday. A match that everybody thought would be preordained. Celtic would win it, especially when they went 1-0 up in the first half and Aberdeen had barely left their own half. But in the end, Aberdeen come back, 2 own goals in the game. Alfie Dorrington putting Celtic in front, and then Kasper Schmeichel with the equaliser. It goes all the way to penalties. Dimitar Mitov makes 2 saves, one from Callum McGregor, the other one from Alan Johnston, and Aberdeen score all of their penalties to lift the Scottish Cup. To look back on what was an incredible game overall, starting slowly, but incredible, especially in the finish, and Aberdeen winning their first Scottish Cup since 1990. It's Craig Telfer. Craig, how's it going?
Aye, brilliant, Fowler, brilliant. Absolutely delighted to be here this morning to talk about it. And I think you've summed the match up quite well. I don't think it was a particularly good game of football, but I think that Aberdeen were quite happy about that. I think that's exactly what they wanted from this match. And just an incredible series of penalties, like Graham Shinney's penalty, Dabag's penalty, absolutely extraordinary stuff. And I'm really, really pleased for Aberdeen. They're a club who, and maybe it's from spending time with your likes yourself, maybe a club that I've kind of got, I'm not really that into Aberdeen, but just the reaction of the players, like watching Graham Shinney's interview, Dave Cormack's interview at the end, Dimitar Mitov's interview, Callum McGregor crying on the pitch, all these factors. It's brilliant. And I was thinking, this must be the biggest Scottish Cup final upset. I was trying to think, maybe when St Johnstone beat Dundee United in 2014, and if not, you're going all the way back to like 1998 when Hearts beat Rangers.
Yeah, even that, I'm no like that. You may look at the two teams in size of clubs and think that St Johnstone was much a shock, but that season, I think it was it Dundee United won the first game, and then after that, every time after that, St Johnstone had their number, and kind of deliberately shifted tactics any time they played them. So I don't think that was just a shock. This was a huge shock.
Yeah.
The only thing that actually comes close to it in the last couple of decades in terms of finals, but not necessarily just Scottish Cup, is Kelly beating Celtic in 2012. League Cup final 2012. That was similar type when it was just like, it just seems like one of those matches you get all the time, like a team's playing the Old Firm in a final, and you just know what the score is going to be beforehand.
Yeah. But I mean, you're saying you know what the score is going to be. I mean, when you looked at the games that the two sides have played each other this season, I mean, other than the 2-2 game earlier on in the campaign when they played at Parkhead, and even then, the number of chances Celtic had, they could have won that quite comfortably. What's that? 2 5-1s, a 6-0 in the League Cup semi-final. I mean, Aberdeen have been absolutely taken to the cleaners by Celtic this season, and going into it, I mean, I didn't get the chance to listen to the preview podcast between Graham Theolis and Robert Borthwick, but I was out yesterday. I watched the game in the pub with Robert, and we're having a discussion about how do you stop Celtic. And Robert was saying he was basically not to make the podcast interesting. You're coming up with these scenarios of how can Aberdeen stop Celtic, because ultimately you're thinking, well, it's just this is probably the most easiest to predict final that we've seen in ages. And you're saying that, I think the way to get at Celtic is you've got to come out and play against them. If you sit deep, that's easy to play against, because this is a team that you've seen what Rangers have done when they've played them this season. They've gone out and given the game. And Aberdeen didn't do that at all. It was only really about 10 minutes to go when Shayden Morris came on that they really quickened the pace up a wee bit. But it was just, I've lost my train of thought there because I'm just so excited about it.
I think when you're talking about, because obviously like Aberdeen finishing 5th, beating Celtic, and it's a club the size of Aberdeen as well, it may not seem like it should be that big a shock, but it is about the context coming into it.
Oh yeah.
The fact that, and even going a goal down, because I was quite confident that the game would be a lot closer than people thought, especially after Celtic reserves went up to Pittodrie in that midweek and the penultimate round of fixtures in the Premiership and absolutely smashed Aberdeen. And I said on the podcast after that, I think it'd be similar to the Hearts-Rangers final recently, where Rangers reserves went to Tynecastle and smashed Hearts, and then everybody's like, oh, well, there's no chance next week. But it's like, nah, it doesn't quite work like that.
I know what you mean.
It's a very different type of game. There's a whole lot more tension around it that's going to get to Celtic as well. And I think you saw that. But it wasn't just that. It was also getting gubbed at Ibrox, going to Tannadice, being the better team in the first half by quite some distance. And then as soon as they get a bit of adversity against them, they crumbled in that game. And I just thought that what would happen here, it would be a tight game, but as soon as Celtic got themselves in front, Aberdeen would not be able to respond. But that didn't happen at all. They kept their they managed to find some reserves that have just been missing for weeks, months now, and managed to stay mentally strong and to stay determined and to not give up hope that they could get back into it.
You're right. It's because there was long periods, I think, particularly in the first half, where and long spells in the second half as well, where Aberdeen just couldn't see the ball. They didn't see the ball. I mean, and to be fair, Celtic weren't exactly probing or penetrating. A lot of it was just like one-touch passes in the centre circle, where like the centre-back and McGregor are exchanging the ball. And to be as organised and to be as like to be able to concentrate for well into extra time as well. That really takes some doing. And I thought when I was watching back the highlights this morning just before we jumped on this, but Liam McLeod, the commentary was quite interesting there when he was talking about when the changes were being made and Shayden Morris was brought on. Shayden Morris is like he had a game changing impact in this. Thought he was a huge factor in the game going in Aberdeen's favour, and just making the point that you have to make the changes because you don't want to look back. Say if Celtic had won that match 1-0 and you hadn't made it, you'd be thinking, man, what if we brought in Shane Morris? What if we'd had a bit more of a go? And it's credit to Aberdeen. I mean, these things, I know it's easy to say. I mean, if it hadn't worked out and say that Schmeichel had just let that cross go and it just went wide, wouldn't be saying this, but it did go in Aberdeen's favour. So Jimmy Thelin it looks like Jimmy Thelin got everything absolutely spot on yesterday even.
Yeah, to talk about the changes, I also thought Pap Gay's introduction was quite big for them as well. He got surprisingly tired in extra time for a man who had come on as sub. But he certainly made an impact when he first came on. And I actually thought, when I looked at the Aberdeen team to begin with, he's been rubbish recently. But we've talked about a review for the Terrace. Like, the guy's just got some weird X factor about him. And I thought, if Aberdeen are going to win this game, they're going to need that chaos. So when the teams first came out, I looked at, or when they first showed that it was going to be a three at the back and it was Nisbet and Keskinen up front, I was like, I think Gay would be better than Keskinen there. And so it proved. I mean, it was probably helped actually. And maybe it ended up being the right decision because you got that impact off the bench and you by that point lulled Celtic into a bit of a false sense of security and you kind of killed the game as a kind of any hope of it being a kind of frenzied, all high octane contest, which obviously would have suited Celtic from the start. Like, you'd killed that. So it was maybe the perfect time to bring on somebody like Gay. But I did think watching the first half, he should have started because Keskinen and this bit of the first half were absolutely pish. Because that was So Thelin was getting a bit of stick in like the group chat and I think in the wider kind of media as well because everybody was going on about like Aberdeen need to do something. They're showing like no ambition. They need to do something. But I was like watching the first half going, no, I think they're actually nailing what their game plan is here, which is to frustrate Celtic and do what I said, to rope-a-dope them, basically. And the lack of chances, up until Maida's one right at the end, the lack of chances that Celtic had over the 90 minutes show that Aberdeen's tactics were spot on because you have to do that. You either do that or you get the biggest luck in the world where Celtic just miss loads of opportunities. But how often does that happen?
Very, very rarely. Very, very rarely. I think the only piece of play that Celtic was genuinely well crafted was where Engels hit the post. Yeah, that was a well worked. You could see what they were trying to do and just trying to create the space and allowed Engels to move the ball onto his left foot. And it's a great shot and really unfortunate that it bounced off the post. But a lot of the time, I mean, we were talking about Aberdeen's concentration, and they really had to make Celtic work for that rope-a-dope that you described. But I would say, like, not to take anything away from Aberdeen here, but I would say as much as like Celtic lost this, as much as Aberdeen won it. And I think that this is Celtic. The criticism that can often be labelled at Celtic is just when it's like stodgy, unimaginative, passing for the sake of passing, like a lack of precision and a lack of penetration. And it really speaks to the fact that, and this is probably something we was going to think about maybe coming on to discussing, but that you've spent £9 million on a centre forward, £11 million on a central midfielder. You got Paulo Bernardo there, and you're not getting anything off them. Like McCowan offered so much more coming off the bench. Johnny Kenny, like coming off the bench, offered more than Adam Idah. And I think Adam Idah's going to go down. He's obviously got his qualities. I remember discussing when they played Aston Villa and he scored 2 really good goals in that game. You can see he's definitely got something about him. But I don't think he has done anything since he's signed for the club permanently to justify that £9 million transfer fee.
I thought he was a huge reason why Aberdeen's tactics worked as well as they did, because so for those who, if there's anybody listening didn't see the game, Don set up Thelin eventually changed it. He's basically played a 4-2-3-1 the entire season. He changed it to a 3-5-2. And when I first saw that, I was like, right, okay, you obviously need... I thought it was a stupid move to begin with, because I was like, this smacks of desperation. And I was like, how are you going to play a 3 at the back against a team that plays 3 up front with a dynamic play of Maeda and Kuhn? But then the game started and I was like, all right, this is actually a proper back 5.
Yeah.
And that Devlin, who was playing on his weaker side on the left, was tracking Kuhn, and Jensen was tracking Maeda. And then they just had the 3 centre-halves to deal with balls in the penalty area. And Celtic do like to get down the wings. And part of the reason why they do like to get down the wings, especially if Adam Idah's in the team, is that it's harder for them to play through the centre against these low blocks, because Idah doesn't... I just managed to combine him and Maeda there. Idah isn't good enough to, at least not regularly. He's done it on occasion, but overall he doesn't have a consistency to play that back to goal, link play these kind of reverse passes, these give and goes in these little tight areas.
It looks like he should be able to do that.
He looks like he should be good at doing that, but he's not. The things that Kyogo was so good at doing, he doesn't have that. So Celtic couldn't really play down the centre of the park. The Engels example is one of the few times where they did manage to kind of break them open in those areas, but you just can't go into him and then kind of set up there when there's so tight a space. And the other thing was Aberdeen's midfield 3 just kind of playing like kind of zonal marker of just shifting for like right to left whenever the play went, and that then helped negate any impact that Alistair Johnson or Greg Taylor would make as well. So it worked out very well in terms of, because obviously knew Idah's been playing a bit recently. It could have just started Maeda up top, but ever since Jota got injured, they've gone with Idah with Maeda on the left. And I think Thelin just played it to perfection, knowing that they would struggle to attack them inside, and that would be the place where the fewest bodies were, or where they could be got at the most, but Celtic just weren't set up to do that. It's
a damning indictment of the player, and as you know, it's not his fault that the Celtic paid as much money for him as he did. And when a team in Scotland, when even Celtic or Rangers, when they're paying these big transfer fees, you expect immediate results. And I remember at the time thinking when he come on loan from Norwich, and I know he scored against Rangers in the cup final, and great moment for him, great moment for the club. And even then, just thinking, when they were talking of making a permanent transfer, I remember at the time thinking, have we seen enough from him to justify making him a permanent transfer? I know that he gives you something different to what Kyogo Furuhashi does, but is that the right direction? And then when you see £9 million, it's like, you know, when Nicolas Pepe went to Arsenal for £72 million and the club conducted an internal investigation as to where all that money went. Anthony going to Manchester United for £82 million. This is the same. This is I put this in the bracket of where did the money go? Where did the money go? Because I just not good at all. And you've summed it really up well there. Where Aberdeen they must have taken one look at him and just been thinking, "Yep, this is how we're going to play the game," and it worked because his impact was negligible, and his impact's been negligible for a wee while now.
His goal record's like quite good across this. Well, not quite good. His goal record's better than you think you maybe would be considering the criticism, but it's very kind of Tory Andre Flo vibes of like empty calories type of goals. He often scores at junctures in games where it doesn't matter, when he's adding on a fourth or fifth.
Yeah. I think is that not the stat that you look for a striker? You look at, it's like if you open the scoring, you're equalising or you're scoring the winner. Those are the metrics. Not if you get like as you say, the fourth and a 5-0 win down at like St Johnstone or something like that. That's not, you're not impressing anyone with that.
And it's what you say, like when they went out and got him for a permanent deal after that loan, and it does come down to the game last year, like scoring the winner against Rangers, the 89th minute. The fans were desperate for Idah to come back, but that was really a case of, I know this happens in football quite a lot, and this is kind of what football is all about, but letting like emotion like overbear logic, and like Idah overall was not good and was definitely not worth £9 million. And if Norwich, I think I've seen fans as well criticise the club and that they had no backup, that they wanted Idah, thought Norwich were going to cave and accept 4 or 5 million, which I still think could have been better spent elsewhere, to be honest. But they kind of thought that's a reasonable price, and then they just put all their eggs in the Idah basket. And then when it came time for the kind of transfer, they were kind of rolling on, they were like, okay, we're actually just going to have to pay $9.5 million to get this guy in.
Yeah, and it's as when Celtic are looking to in the transfer window, what's the first thing that you think Celtic need? They need a new striker. And if you're spending £9 million a player, that's that's the sort of the fee that you're bringing him in. It's going to be like you give him like for 5 or 6 years, and he's going to be the guy that's going to cement this dynasty that Celtic have got.
You're thinking like Edward, like spent 9 million on Edward, and you exactly saw that thinking there. You'd seen him on loan. He took a while to get up to speed, but once he did, you were like, you looked at the ability, you looked at the technique, thought, nah, this is a no-brainer. They're going to double their money, and that's exactly what they did.
Yeah, and you can't imagine anyone coming in and paying, like, even getting their money back for Idah. No. I couldn't see anyone paying £9 million for him. And I don't want to get too real. I suppose as well the lack of thrust in the middle of the park without Hatate being in there as well was the big problem. I've used that word a couple of times, penetration, and that's why it was easy for Aberdeen to defend against. You were talking there about Adam Idah's lack of impact and why that was easy for Aberdeen. But in the midfield, like Shinnie and I think it was Paul Aversa that was playing in the middle with him. They had a lot of running to do, but they were never really turned. You know what I mean? There was nothing. Yeah. The game was all in front of them, if you know what I mean.
It seems Bernardo did not play well at all. And I was surprised like when the initial subs were made, it was Engels that went off instead. That actually took me by surprise a bit. I thought Bernardo was worse than him. And it just seemed like, I mean, it shouldn't be, because he has played enough this season that he should be on the same wavelength as his teammates. But it did kind of look like they missed Hatate, like they missed some sort of understanding there. There was a few times in the first half, twice certainly that stick out, where it was like try to play a pass to Idah and they just were not on the same wavelength at all. And you think of a Celtic team and a Celtic Brendan Rodgers team that must obviously like do so much in training and anticipation of the game at the weekend. It was just kind of quite uncharacteristic for them.
I saw a tweet saying that Rodgers hasn't been backed. He said, "Really? I think he's been very, very well backed. It's just that the money hasn't been spent." I do quite like what I've seen from Engels. I think he's got a bit about him. I think that once he's had a season to adapt, and if he has a holiday and he's able to recharge the batteries and go on, because it's a big demands on playing in Scottish football. Big demands being a Celtic player. I know that there's all the advantages that come with it. You play for the best team, but with that comes with all the pressure that goes alongside it. And I think he's been described in this podcast previously, a project player, that the idea, we spent a lot of money on him. You're going to have to keep on playing him so we can try and double our value for him. And I do think that Celtic will be able to do that. But it's games like this that I think that the supporters will be looking at them and just thinking, I don't know where this squad, I don't know if this is I don't know if we're moving in the right direction and if it needs turned over going forward.
Yeah, you could see it was still quite startling. I mean, obviously when Jota's fit, and Jota's out for a while, but him coming back did give them some real kind of strength and depth in those attacking areas that then was diminished when he went out. And then obviously they didn't actually replace Kyogo. They just kind of thought, well, we could muddle through to now and the end of the season. And that's maybe where you could say that the manager wasn't back, that nobody else was brought in January. But over the piece, like, he spent 27 million on 3 fucking players. Can he say he was backed?
I suppose the fact that Johnny Kenny, I'm sure he flopped in a loan spell at Queen's Park last season. The fact that he's coming off the bench, and I'll say, to be fair, Johnny Kenny, I actually think he certainly did a lot more than Idah did. But you're right, when you kind of go through the striking options. And it's at the point as well, and I think this is quite interesting. Idah, see when Idah went through and goal, I remember just thinking at the time, I think Mitov's going to save this. I think that Idah's an amazing player. See, he doesn't need to think about things. I think he's quite instinctive. He's been comfortably the best player in Scotland this year. I think there's no, I'm trying to think who's, maybe Simon Murray is like Nicky Cadden are the only sort of players that have perhaps come close enough to.
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say Simon Murray. Maybe not a bad shout, because I would just say, well, try to think, instead of trying to think of other players, I'm saying Idah is definitely the deserved player of the year.
But it's that sort of thing where perhaps a lack of finesse is what lets him down. And I found it really interesting. See, with his penalty, I thought that Mitov did. I know he ultimately scored for it, but see, to stand right in the middle. Because I think that he's not going to be able to angle the ball properly. I thought Mitov got that absolutely spot on. Unfortunately, he didn't save it, so maybe he didn't get it spot on. But the thinking, you could absolutely see the thinking just to stand right in the middle, because he's not going to place this. He's just going to try and smash it as hard as he can, because because I don't think he's for all the good stuff as well. I think that his technical ability is perhaps a bit deficient compared to other aspects of his game.
Yeah, but just kind of final thing on Celtic before getting back to the winners of this. Because, this to finish off the point about the lack of depth. Like, Yang has chipped in with some goals this season and has got better than what Celtic fans thought he was initially last year and even the first half of this season. But it's clear that overall he's not the type of player they want in terms of standard. And James Forrest. Like, yeah, I know he got that goal against St Mirren and isn't it a great story, and he's the most decorated ever player and he scored in 16 straight seasons, but I was still like you need the goal to see off a cup final or to get a winner or whatever, and it's James Forrest in the year of our Lord 2025.
Yeah, I think maybe there is something to be said about Rodgers not getting the backing, because when I saw the starting 11, I thought that's pretty good. Obviously, you'd want Hatate in there and Jota to be in there, but even so, there's 9 of your 11 players are available. Then looking at the bench and thinking, actually, maybe the level of depth isn't quite there. And then as was exposed there as the game went on, Celtic didn't really have options to change it. The best chances was like off the cuff stuff. That's what I mean in terms of like the lack of off the cuff. Jeffrey Schlupp having a shot from 20 yards that hit the bar. Great effort, right enough. But these are the sort of things that you don't. There's not a cohesive attack, if you know what I mean. These are just things that happen off the cuff. The ball breaks to him favourably. He has the shot, but just stodgy on their part. But I think we've probably spent enough time talking about Celtic. Fucking let's talk about the winners.
I thought it was a real throwback performance from Graham Shinnie as well.
Yeah.
Like the amount of running he had to do, and it's not been great this season, but I think it's because he's still had to be relied. I know he's a captain, so you maybe should be playing every week, and if you struggle to do that, maybe you shouldn't be captain, for instance. However, I do think they've maybe had to over-rely on him a bit this season because of the fact that he obviously played a lot at the start when things were good, but as the campaign went on, somebody his age with his kind of style of play, you want to be resting a bit more because he is all action.
Yeah.
But he is at an age now where he can't really do that every single game to the effectiveness that he was once able to when he was in his prime, when he was at Aberdeen the first time. But obviously you can save it for rare occasions, and he saved it for this one. He was just up and down the pitch constantly.
It's a great story as well. The only player to have won, who have captained two different sides to win the Scottish Cup. Cally Thistle 10 years ago, Aberdeen now.
Two different old firm sides since like the 1920s or something.
It's amazing, absolutely amazing. And you're right in what you say. I love this post-match interview. I think Graham Shinnie, I think that maybe you talked about his style of player. That's maybe why some people can't quite take to him, or find him quite narky. However, love this post-match interview. Just saying it's written in the stars. It's great. It's great. I'm absolutely delighted for them. And seeing, so I was thinking about this, like, and so I'm kind of going off on a bit of a tangent here, but just seeing what it meant to the Aberdeen supporters and the players. I mean, that whole West Stand there, how it was all red, it looked magnificent.
Yeah.
It looked absolutely magnificent. See when Celtic, watch it in the pub. See when Celtic scored, the noise was equivalent of a conversion in rugby. It's like, yes, well done. And I was thinking,
silence for the kicker.
Pretty much respect the kicker. But whereas when Aberdeen scored, it's like just this primary coloured explosion. And I never tell Celtic supporters how to follow their club or how they should be processing their emotions. But that idea of just like as a goal in a cup final, and that's sort of been met with that kind of muted applause. And then just see what it meant to Aberdeen. Aberdeen fans all staying behind. See if that had been Celtic the one, there'd been fans that had been out the door to try and beat the traffic as soon as the full-time whistle. Every single Aberdeen supporter was staying behind there.
Well, Tony was watching the game at the Harpen Castle. There was a Celtic fan in there, and he had a Celtic hoodie on, and he left before full time. And he just took a photo of him at the tram stop across the road.
I do not understand. I do not understand that. Something. I hope to never understand that. And I think that the point that around the way I'm coming around to it, listening to Graham Shinnie and listening to Dave Cormack as well, because this has been. Dave Cormack, God love him, has really put his heart and his soul into Aberdeen. They've never, like that Simpsons. Simpsons thing was like there's a grown man crying, when Principal Skinner's talking to Dolph Kearney and Jimbo. It was like that with Dave Cormack when he sacked Jim Goodwin when they lost to Darvel. He was really emotional about it. But I'm so happy for him. Because it's like for all of the bad, like some of the daft decisions that he's made, like kind of having a couple of Riocas texting Joel Sked, You know, it's like these are the.
He's very cringe. He's very cringe.
Aye.
But there was an Aberdeen supporting friend of mine who I saw late last night, and he says like he is cringe, but he's what we would be like.
Yeah,
like if we owned the football club, we would act exactly like that, and he's right.
Yeah,
it's just like a fan that's managed to own his football club, and that's how he acts.
And it's been such a weird season for Aberdeen as well. Such a weird season.
Oh yeah,
in terms of how.
This is huge, actually. I wanted to talk about this. This is absolutely huge for them next season, and for not just the future of Jimmy Thelin, who, had they lost this, even a defeat, would have been under a little bit of pressure. There was already starting to be dissented voices considering the finish they had to the campaign. And if they went into next season and not had a good start, the atmosphere around the place would have just been a lot to overcome. Even if he managed to get it right in the summer transfer window, just a couple of games of bad luck early in the season, and fans would start to turn, and then that puts doubts into players, and then it could really snowball from there. And I think you were looking at a scenario where Thelin would have been out of a job by the middle of next year. But now it's the ability to build more. Cormac said himself they're going to get the checkbook out because they're getting this money for Europe. They want to build on this. And so it's now looking from a place of where you were like, he's almost maybe going to be working his notice already to this is something to actually build from. And as a Hearts fan, I'm now looking at Aberdeen next season, having previously thought that'll turn mutinous within September. That'll be fine. Don't have to worry about that. They'll need a season of transition under a new manager, and then they'll be back to thinking, don't like this. Don't like this as a Hearts fan. I do like one aspect of the victory as a Hearts fan, which I'm sure we'll get to before we finish. But in terms of Aberdeen next year, I think this is absolutely huge.
Yeah. I can't disagree with any of that. It's because you're right. It's just incredible how these things work in football. The idea that say you say you've got to go for it. Shayden Morris comes on. If Cassius Michael leaves that cross, it finishes 1-0 to.
Sorry, that's just reminding me of something. Did you think when it went to penalties, not just because of like the kind of narrative around it and the way the game went, did you think that Aberdeen were going to win just because they had the better goalkeeper? Because that's what I thought.
I thought that having Mitov in there gives him a great chance. Everything I've seen from Mitov, I think he's a superlative goalkeeper, and it feels as though that even when he was at St Johnstone, you're wondering why are Rangers not going in for him? Yeah. Because he's good enough for to be playing at a really big club, and I imagine Aberdeen's a stepping stone for him as well, because I imagine he can have another move and make a lot of money from it. I don't know how old he is, but late 20s.
Well, he's not old at all for a goalkeeper.
Perfect, absolutely perfect. So he's been a phenomenal signing for Aberdeen. And just in the penalty shootout, I thought I mentioned the save there from the almost saving my Idah shot, but the other two saves, well, read them perfectly. I mean, they were bad penalties from McGregor and from Alistair Johnson. And it's, in a way, it's quite funny. If you've ever disliked prefects, then that's good to see the pair of them missing. But he's a good goalkeeper. When we went to penalties, Fowler, I didn't. I hate using the term lottery because obviously not. You've got to train for these things. But I had no idea who was going to win at that stage.
I just thought Aberdeen. because I thought, especially with Schmeichel making that error, I thought his confidence is going to be a lot higher going into this, and I just think he's a better goalkeeper in general.
Nah, fair enough. Fair enough. And I tell you, another person I'm delighted for, absolutely for, Nicky Devlin. See, it was 11 years ago where Scott Booth had released him from Stennismuir saying, you're not my kind of player, and saying that he lacked confidence. And what a career he's gone on to have. Not necessarily like a flashy player, but the fact that you've went on to captain Ayr United, spell it at Walsall, moved to Livingston, goes to Aberdeen, you think he's just going to be a squad player, but someone who's worked really, really hard in getting into the Scotland team, and I'm so happy for him, because he's such a likeable personality as well. I think that when you see people, if you could play football, you're good enough to play football, that's how you would want to play. I look at Devlin, that's how I want to play. You leave everything out there on the pitch, so it's great for him. It's great for him, and it's just a big daft game of football. I wish I had more insight and analysis than that, but just seeing the Aberdeen fans and the colour and the noise, how much it meant to them, reading some of the comments in Pine Bovril after the game, and it's incredible to think that for a team Aberdeen's size, this is only the fourth Scottish Cup win in their history, 8th Scottish Cup win.
Eighth, I think.
Eighth Scottish Cup win, or certainly the first in 35 years.
First since 1990.
First since 1990, where weirdly enough, they beat Celtic. I'm right in saying they beat Celtic on penalties, and that's the first time a final had ever been decided in a penalty shootout.
I think 9-8, I think it was.
So there's a sort of weird roundabout way for it as well. Just brilliant, man. Brilliant. And it's great for them. I don't think there's any club in the country that's just had as weird a season. Maybe Queen's Park in a way, beating the Rangers. And then, they've got a £5.7 million deficit to try and bridge over the course of the season. But that's a discussion for another day. But they're just such a weird season to have such a good start to look as though they're going to be in relegation bother. Be one of the worst points total since that winning period. I think just slightly better than St Johnstone's. And then you finish up the Scottish Cup and no one gave you a chance.
Yeah, mad. Right, final word. Hibernian Football Club.
Yes. They will no longer guaranteed group stage football in the Europa League.
The most Hibs thing to ever happen to Hibs, honestly. It's wild. It was like, we should have saw it coming. We really should have saw it coming. But I don't know, there's just something about David Gray and his impact on Hibs as a football club, both as a player and now as a manager, where it was like, maybe it is. Maybe just Hibs to not Hibs, because obviously they didn't Hibs it, because there's nothing they could have done about this. They weren't playing, but to not routinely befall to this type of this mental things that just happen to them, when it's like the amount of bad fortune that happens to one football club. You could have thought with Gray, he's got this, he's able to ward away the bad spirits, but no, oh no, they were back to rob them in this one. And yeah, Tony said in the group chat that he said he felt lower after that game than he did in the 2012 final.
Actually, I was talking to Tony. I was trying to arrange. I think we were talking about going for a pint or something. I was trying to arrange a time, and I suggested about the Scottish Cup final, and he said, "Oh, it's got massive." He was talking about the ramifications that the game had for Hibs. So they said a bunch of Hibs fans will watch it. He said it's probably 2 Hibs for you. So I was like, well, that's fair enough. You want to go and spend it with the folk that you go to the games with. And I can't imagine how they would have been feeling after that. You've been absolutely gutted, an absolutely phenomenal season. You think of some achievement, and a bunch of Celtic playing against one of the worst sides in the country couldn't get the job done. It's so funny. Funny.
He painted the picture of what it must have been like in the Harping Castle with literally just one sentence, which was, I think it was after Aberdeen equalised, it was towards the end of the 90 minutes, and he says, "The Harp's getting restless now," and that just painted the picture perfectly for me, because I just imagine that from kickoff, before kickoff, up until Aberdeen equalised, it was just all jovial. It was just everybody having a laugh. Probably a lot of people barely even paying attention to the game, because they just thought, like I said at the start, it was just a preordained thing. Celtic were going to win. Aberdeen have not looked like anything like they could possibly upset Celtic in a cup final. And then Aberdeen equalised, and then people are starting getting really invested in it and getting pissed off at Celtic being shite.
Yeah.
And then ultimately it ends in that huge disappointment. I mean, they could still do it. I mean, last season, I looked at, so they are now Killie from this campaign, for those kind of not sure which kind of seeding or whatever you call it going into it. So they go into the second round of Europa League qualifying, which is what Killie did last year. They lost to Cercle Bruges. If Hibs got that draw, that's not a bad draw. Hearts played them away for home in the Conference League and would have got a draw if Lawrence Shankland wasn't in the worst of the yips and blazed that penalty over the bar. So that's a tie that Hibs could win. Then Killie, lost that one, went into the Conference League, got Tromsø, beat them. So obviously, again, similar stature of team, Hibs could win that. And Copenhagen in the Europa Conference League playoff, I mean, I would say that would be a step too far for Hibs. However, you could get a luckier draw. You could get a club of similar size that's, starting off the season quite poorly or going through a bit of a transition period. Maybe they've sold a number of players in the summer, etc., etc. There is still a door open for them there. But we've seen it with Scottish clubs so many times in Europe when you have to navigate several rounds of qualifying. Do they do it? Do they fuck?
Now that's a pretty grim way to finish what's been quite
not for me! Not for me, mate! Not for me!
But just finish up, just a brilliant day for Aberdeen, and it's just great to see someone outside Rangers and Celtic winning the Scottish Cup. That's what it's all about, man. That's what it's all about. Delighted for them and their fans, and just hope they hope they have a really good summer. One game left in the season to go, Fowler, just tomorrow night, Monday night.
Yes, aye, so we'll be back for that. It'll be another free-to-air episode, and it will be Joel Sked and Sean McGuigan talking over the second leg of the Premiership playoff final, which is poised at one each between Livingston and Ross County, the game in the Highlands. And then we will be back, probably release it in probably a week on Monday. I'll get out the end of season Terrace Awards show.
Yep.
And then from that point, I don't know what we'll be doing on the main feed. Probably just putting up little kind of drips of stuff. Maybe do some pop culture stuff again for the summer if anybody wants to podcast about that. But the Patreon will be going throughout the summer. So if you want to not miss out on Scottish Football Chat, then patreon.com/Terrace Podcast is the way to do so. But I think that'll do us, Telfer. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you, Fowler. Enjoyed that.
And thank you to everybody for listening. We'll talk to you again soon. Goodbye.